Hello everyone, welcome to 830 Amplified, powered by PleasantonExpress.com and presented by Price Chevrolet. Together, let's drive. I am your host, Daniel Elizondo, managing editor of the Pleasanton Express, and today we have a special guest, Mr. Jon Brauchle. He is the Deputy Fire Marshal for Atascosa County. He just recently became Deputy Fire Marshal, probably in 2024. Is that correct, Jon?
Correct, yes.
And you are a retired Game Warden also, who you retired here, stationed here in Atascosa County.
Correct.
So welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
Let's just talk about this. The reason why we've got you on here is because we're getting ready for deer season.
Right.
And, you know, being that you're retired game warden, you'd be a little bit more knowledgeable about what's going on. So when does deer season begin?
It's November 1st. Right now, it's actually begun. There's bow season is going on right now.
Oh, that's right, the bow.
And there's also, people are seeing deer taken by rifles on Facebook, and they're going, hey, what's up with that? Well, there's a managed land deer permit program where certain landowners get a management plan where they can start earlier than the rest of everybody else, and they run a little later, and they have a management plan where they're supposed to take a certain amount of animals and special parameters they have to meet.
I didn't realize that. See, I'm not a deer hunter, obviously, so that's why I'm asking all these questions.
Yeah.
But that's interesting to know. So landowners can do this prior to the actual opening season.
Right, and so they have to get with the Parks and Wildlife biologist, and they have to have a certain amount of acreage. They can do a co-op and combine acreage with their neighbors and get a management plan going. But it's something that they have to initiate through one of our you said retired game warden, and we always joke it's like once a game warden, always a game warden. You know, it's like, but yes, I am retired. But so I'm going to say "are" and "we" a lot. But anyway, you have to start that with a management plan from one of the Parks and Wildlife biologists.
What are some of the things that you guys, when you were working as a game warden, what were some of the things that you had to really harp on with hunters during the season?
Get along with your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the calls that we would get were neighbors not getting along or not knowing each other. You know, I feel like in years past, people had to get to know that when we were more agrarian and everybody was either farming or ranching, and if your bull got over in your neighbor's pasture, you went and talked to him, or people got along. Now that there's not so much of a need for that, this is just my personal perspective after being a warden for so long. It's like people don't get to know their neighbors as much, where you have just a hunting piece of property next to somebody that farms or whatever. Well, those kind of can conflict. But by and large, if you get to know your neighbor before the season, talk to him in case any issues come up. You know, don't do things like, if you're hunting and whether you know your neighbor or not, don't put a deer blind right on the fence line. You know, I've seen some where they could have been used as a fence post in the fence line, and it's not illegal, but it's unethical to do that, and
Okay.
It's just not a good look and not a good neighborly thing to do. So get to know your neighbors. Know before you go. There's lots of resources available. Certainly the Outdoor Annual, which used to be, like I said, I have visual aids here. Used to be the hard copy that we used to carry around boxes and boxes and hand them out like candy. But now they're kind of hard to get. I was telling you earlier, last night I went to the the National Night Out, and I saw our Texas Parks and Wildlife biologist David Veal there, and he had some. And it's kind of like doing a drug deal, because it's like he doesn't have a whole lot of them where used
Trying to find one.
Yeah. So but luckily that's all online now. You can get an app, Outdoor Annual app, and it'll update each year. You don't have to do anything. And everything's right there. You can also go to the website. The website has all kinds of resources. In the whole know before you go theme, if you go through all those avenues and you still don't know, contact somebody with Parks and Wildlife. I don't like to throw maybe I do, throw my fellow former cohorts under the bus, but I got plenty of calls. We all get calls. We all get a state-issued phone, And that phone is published on the web page under you go to Texas Parks and Wildlife web page. They have a section for game wardens. You can click on it. You can click on it by county. It will have every game warden that's in that county, and it will have their phone number. Now, if you have a question about that area, if you're going to go to a different county, I suggest that you call the game warden over there. If you read everything and you still don't know, call and find out that way. Don't do it at like 1 o'clock in the morning, or something like that necessarily. Do it at a reasonable hour, or leave a message, whatever. They'll get back with you. But if you do have questions, just, we'd rather people not, the time you wonder, well, should I tag this, or is this the right species, or whatever, is not when the game warden's walking up. That's not the time to ask them. It's like, well, what is this,
After
right, yeah. So there are certain responsibilities you have before you have to take care of it before you go out. So anyway.
I think I'll speak for a lot of people that Lone Star Law became so popular on A&E. I believe it was on A&E. I don't even know if they show it. I think I've seen just reruns, but I don't know if it's still active, current right now. But I became friends with Mike Boone, who became very popular because I lived in Hardin County for a long time, and I knew him. And then when this show came out, I came up to him. I'm like, I didn't know you were on TV. And he just laughed and he said, yes. He said, it's not something that I really asked to do, but they just wanted me to do it. And he was really good. And then I kind of started watching all the game wardens around the state and how they work. Nueces County, you got counties up north, it was just very different in what they do, even though you do the same job. Right.
Yeah. All over the state, it varies greatly
with a different wildlife.
Right. And especially like on the coast, you always have something to do every time of year. Like here, there's no public water than the Atascosa River, really. So it's on the coast. You have commercial fishing, shrimping. You have recreational fishing, water safety, all the hunting seasons, duck season. I mean, you can go out. I remember I was stationed in Corpus for a while, and I went out one day, and there was this guy on the Oso. As you're driving into Flower Bluff, you drive over Oso Bay, and I was down below there, and I went, and it was a really, really cold day. I mean, nobody was out, and there's this dude, and it's about 11 o'clock in the morning or so, and he's in this car, and he's got his fishing rod. He's parked along the bay side this way. He's got his window cracked just enough for his rod to go out. And he's in the car, and he's got a beer can up on the dashboard.
Oh my God.
And so, he had his license. I was kind of shocked because, on a day like that, you think, oh, the game warden's not going to be out. But, I just kind of knocked on the window. I was like, man, you just really wanted to get out of the house, didn't you? And he's like, yeah. But, there's always something going on in those areas.
Yeah. And talking with Mike, I remember talking with Mike one time, and there was an incident at a river there in Hardin County, and I think it was like midnight, and I got a phone call that there was possibly some boaters that were missing. And I actually went out there. A lot of emergency vehicles and first responders out there, because they didn't really know what was going on, and eventually they did find the people. But as we were sitting there talking, everything was fine. Nobody was hurt. Nobody was injured. They issued some citations of whatnot or whatever. But as we're sitting there, it's about 12:30 in the morning. It's pitch black. And all of a sudden, I'm just talking with Mike, and we're just kind of laughing and, telling stories and stuff. And he just kind of stops, and I go, what's wrong? And he's like, hold on one second. And we just got quiet. And all of a sudden, I could hear a humming. And it was a boat. And he said, hold on one second. So they all pull out their flashlights out to the water, and there's a small watercraft. Of course, there's like 6 teenage kids in it. They're not doing anything. They're just having a little fun. Of course, Mike, it's just Hardin County. It's just like Atascosa County. Everybody knows everybody. He's he's flashing that light, and he says one of the kids' names. He was like, I know your daddy. I know your daddy. You want me to call him, tell him you're out here? And those kids are I mean, do you experience stuff like that too?
Oh, absolutely. You know, and not so much, even in the larger areas like Corpus, it was a more larger metropolitan area. You don't get to know people as much, but certainly in the smaller communities, absolutely. You know, and you sometimes, you know, you hear stories or you've been a part of catching people multiple times, you know, and like Mike hearing that on the water. If you work the water a lot, if you're in a place where you have water and you've got a lot of activity and you work it at night and everything, you become very in tune with things that are going on. You know, I mean, you hear things, you feel things, you know you know whether a boat's gone by. If it's calm night and there's a wake ripple, you know, and you don't see any lights or anything, well, you know there's probably a boat running without lights over there. So stuff like that. So
And that's what they were doing. They didn't have any lights. I
Right,
don't know how
yeah.
those kids were getting through there because it was
yeah,
pitch black. I
Yeah.
mean, and the river is pretty big, but you know, still, you don't know if you're going to hit a log or something that's there in the
yeah.
water.
And we get a lot of calls like that where you have to go out at night. A lot of times it turns out like that everybody's fine, but when it doesn't, that's one of the harder parts of the job for sure.
Now, with deer hunting, talk about what. And I know the hunters know this; they know all the rules and regulations, but just kind of touch on maybe some of the rules of what you can harvest and what you can't harvest, stuff like that.
Okay, well, it depends on what county you're in, and if you go to the Outdoor Annual or the website or wherever you go, there's a section where you can get regulations by county. And for Atascosa County, our deer regulations are 5 deer, no more than 2 bucks, only 1 buck that can have an antler spread of 13 inches or more. So that's a management tool. That's not that every county is not like that. I don't know how many counties are, but that's a management tool to try to get nicer deer. And so it's some people like it, some people don't, because it's not a perfect law. Where there are certainly smaller deer that need to be culled if you're trying to manage, that don't allow you legally, if you don't have one of those managed land deer permits I was talking about. You get one of those, it's a different story. But that's one of the things you have to be wary of here. As far as deer hunting goes,
And then right, when is rut season? When is that?
yeah, that's depending
that
on where you
varies?
are too. Around here it starts a little bit around Thanksgiving, and different times in different areas, and sometimes it's a little later. It just depends.
And that's when there's a lot of activity.
A lot of
there.
activity, and that's when some of bucks kind of let their guard down, and so that's a popular time to hunt and to rattle or whatever you can.
I've also noticed here, especially here in not just the county, but here in Pleasanton, I noticed the deer population just increasing when you're just driving around at night.
Especially out in Oak Forest, and
Yes.
I believe it's still the point, and that's one thing I want to say here, because since I'm no longer active with the department, certainly know before you go, and if you have any questions. But like it was when I was still working, the Oak Forest area has so many deer, and they were to try to thin those deer out, because they were getting to a point where they're coming up on back people's porches. They were getting hit by cars. They would be wounded and go lay up in somebody's,
Back porch.
Yeah, and so it was, it's an issue. They allowed archery hunting. Well, archery hunting it's nice to if it's sometimes it's hard to arrow a deer and get it to stay on your 5-acre property that you have there. Generally, they're going to run a little bit and lie down. So, it was kind of bad for, you're driving. I would circle through there just to kind of have a presence, and I got a call about, Sunday morning there was a buck deer with an arrow through it right in the middle of the intersection, right there. And so, and I had to go dispatch it. It was kind of, that's unfortunate. I had to put out, game wardens have to put out a lot of deer that are injured or whatever like that. But in that situation, it was kind of weird as having a neighborhood being part of your patrol area. But
But that's what
that's
become,
the way
I guess.
that's the way it was. And so it's an issue, certainly. I mean,
Yeah,
they've become very adaptive. There are a whole lot more deer here now than there was when we were in high school.
right.
You know, you never saw that. Now they're like pets over there. So
They're everywhere. I mean, I can go home where I live, and I live in a subdivision, and the other night we just drove in, and there was 3 or 4 deer out there. One of them was a buck.
right,
And they're just I drove slow, and I thought, what is that movement right there? I mean, there's houses everybody with their front lights on, and then there was movement. And then I see these deer crossing the street, and I had to slow down, and then here comes the buck following them. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I never thought, you know, I was stationed in Raymondville and Port Mansfield for a while, and even back in the 90s, there were deer all over Port Mansfield because they had these huge ranches that bordered them. They didn't get a whole lot of hunting pressure, and so they were just big, huge deer running around. And so there was a time when we would, you know, I borrowed somebody's, I'll tell a story. So it's sort of like this. I haven't had to do that this year, but there was a guy who was reportedly, he lived there, and he would put corn outside his kitchen window. And there's these huge bucks that you would see all through town. You can go on any Port Mansfield website, Facebook page, and people post pictures of them. Anyway, and he had a crossbow that he was supposed to, you know, he'd go out when he'd see a good one, and so I was like, man, we want to catch this guy. So I knew a guy that had a vacation home next to him, and I said, hey man, can I surveil from your house, you know, while y'all aren't using it? And so I would go over there at like sunset and sit there in the bathroom, you know, because that was the closest place where I could see it. I went in plain clothes. I used my personal truck that I just gotten that nobody knew I drove. I'd park it down the road a ways and then sneak in this house. And I'd sit there till morning, and he'd come out, and he would get up at night, and flip on the light, and there'd be huge deer there, you know. And I never got him to take one. I kind of eventually figured he was onto me or something, you know, this guy. But I never had to do that here, but it's certainly become a problem. There's a lot of deer in town and in neighborhoods.
Yeah, I see them more like around Airport Road. There's a bunch that you'll see.
There's some big deer over there too.
Yes, they come out, and I don't know what it is. It's that little low water crossing that's over here off of Goodwin. I mean, further down before you get to Airport Road.
Right.
This way.
Right. Yeah. There's always deer there. Yeah.
You'll see a bunch of them just coming in, and they'll go into that field that's out there. You know, I guess it's behind
Used to
all
be
those.
Dr. Austin's, I guess.
Yes, they're all out there. Sometimes I'll see a bunch out there.
Yeah.
Just eating. It's crazy.
Numbers aren't a problem around in town anyway. So.
No, I've even seen. You know what is weird is I think it was around nighttime. I was at Bill Miller, and I was in the drive-through the line, and there was about 2 or 3 cars in front of me, but I was just sitting there and waiting just to move forward, and I saw movement to the right of me, and I looked, and there was a deer in the field right there. Bill Miller just looking at me.
Yeah.
Not that anybody else can hear me, but last night we were driving back in from where did we go last night? Uvalde. So we're coming down past Whataburger this way. 8 deer run across the highway in front of us. I haven't seen any on 97 and I don't know how long. Mm-hmm. But the east side is covered in them.
Yeah, you got to be careful at night, especially during the winter, because they'll get pushed up on the roads, and you know, and there's nice green forbs or grass or whatever they're ryegrass or whatever they're munching on. And
what is it about at night? Because I know that you do have to be careful at night, especially if you're on, like, you know, these county roads or whatever, and you're driving over 50 miles an hour, and you have to really be careful for deer. I mean, what is it? Is it because the road is warm? Are they looking for warmth?
I'm not a biologist. I don't really know. I mean, it's one thing is food. I mean, there's food there, and as hunting season goes, if there's pressure, they'll kind of move out to or become more nocturnal, you know, and
I got
come out. But like I said, I'm not a biologist or anything like that. So but especially in the wintertime, you'll see them along the roads, and that's how we would work road hunters. You know, you could you go out and we had certain areas that we knew deer would hang out, like that where we were talking about on Goodwin, where they're consistently there, and you find a ranch gate where you can get permission to kind of sit behind there, and that you wait for somebody to come by and make a bad decision. So
for somebody that's a beginner deer hunter, of course they would have to go somebody that's a professional or knows what they're doing
Knows
exactly.
what they're doing, yeah.
But what and this is just me and my thoughts. So what if I'm deer hunting? I'm a beginner and I see a deer, and I accidentally shoot it, and it's not legal. What do you do?
Well,
have you ever had situations like that?
First of all, it depends on we have a hunter education program, and there are all sorts of organizations out there. Texas Wildlife Association, they have youth hunting program, they have an adult learn to hunt program, and if you're somebody that's new, I would certainly encourage anyone to go check that out. TWA, it's a nonprofit. They're out in New Braunfels. To get educated and know first. Accidents do happen, especially with kids, even with, if you don't have hunter education, you have to be hunting with someone who has had hunter education or someone who is grandfathered out. I think it's September 2nd, 1971 or September 2nd or 1st, 1972. I don't know. It's right around in there. You have to be with them and in their control.
Okay.
Now, starting at the age of 9, you can take hunter education. And
Wow.
And so it used to be 12. They moved it down, and I guess 9-year-olds got smarter than when we were kids. I don't know.
I know.
But
What
but then
was
we
that?
didn't have hunter education when we were kids.
I
But
think
the main thing is that kind of know before you go, and go with somebody who is familiar with deer and can tell you what you're doing. If accidents do happen, it's best to call a game warden and say, especially with a kid, it's a learning experience, and the best thing to do is be honest and upfront and say, hey, we made this mistake, and I've had many calls like that over.
And of course you've got to wear the apparel to make sure that you're safe as well, because you've got
On
a lot
private property, not so much. I mean, if on public lands there is a hunter orange requirement, it's certainly.
just because you may not know that there's somebody else there.
There are all kinds of things to do before you go to know. Depending on how big your piece of property is, there is in Texas. This should make sense and be perfectly obvious, but you're required to keep your bullets on your property. It's called trespass by projectile, and so if you're setting up a blind in a feeder situation, you don't want to put the feeder right next to your neighbor's fence line in your blind over here where you're shooting into their property, and maybe you know what's over there, maybe you don't. You can I've suggested people use Google Earth, to see what's there. But then there again goes back to talking to your neighbor and making sure you're not endangering someone over there. There's especially some of these smaller places that where it's hard to keep a high-powered rifle or the like off there. And while I'm on this subject, I'd like to mention that it's dove season now.
Yes.
And that even applies to a shotgun. People shoot in the air or whatever, and especially around neighborhoods, we would get a lot of calls.
What goes up?
What's got to come down? And so if some guy's out on his back porch grilling a burger, he didn't want to be pellets raining down on him, and he shouldn't have to. And so, yeah, and you can't shoot on or across a public road. But mistakes do happen. But the best thing to do is be open and honest about it, about anything. I always make the point that most of the times law enforcement in general, but certainly game wardens, are going to know the answer to a question before they ask you. So, and that's going to be if you lie and they know, you're probably going to get a little different treatment than if you tell the truth. So
yeah, exactly. Talking about like with private property, and especially here in town, we're talking about the deer population and stuff. And I remember seeing in Lone Star Law one episode where a guy called the game warden because he had a deer that got trapped in his backyard and he couldn't get it out, and it panicked. The deer was it was a little doe, I think, and it was panicking, and the game warden actually had to go in there because it got tied up in some wire or something. That's dangerous because even though it's a doe, they're strong.
yes, they are a wild animal. Even I've had to catch. I made the comment a little while ago that I've gotten beat up by more than one deer trying to hem it up and get it out of there. We had one that was, people like to keep them as pets sometimes, and if they're coming in your yard and you feed them, that's one thing. There is a danger that you're going to acclimate them a little too much to people, and especially during the rut or in certain situations, they can get upset, and especially the bucks have antlers, and they can harm you. But I had one situation in Oasis County where a friend of mine, well, there were three game wardens. We responded to this call. Oasis County has multiple game wardens, and there was it was a neighborhood with a small yard, but like a 6-foot high chain link fence, and they had a little buck deer in there. And it was kind of fine until we went to go try to catch it, and things game wardens carry in the truck is a rope, and we have a catch pole. We had both those. I had the rope. Anyway, I thought I was going to just go sling a little rope on there and
I got this.
yeah.
I got this.
Anyway, so then the deer didn't like that too much, and so it starts running around there. People going kind of crazy. And anyway, so the second time I got it, and then we pounced on it. We tied it up, and it had broke. It was a small buck, and it had broken its antler. And we really didn't have it tied up very well, but we had to go take it out of the town. I mean, this thing was too acclimated. We were going to go take it to Live Oak County. Well, it wasn't really tied well, and so I had the bright idea of, I'll just kind of hold it down in the truck. And my buddy, he's kind of could be a somewhat angry driver at times, and so we're driving down SPID. And I'm in the back of the truck with this, trying to hold this thing down and hold the ropes on it. And he's like weaving in and out of traffic.
Oh, my gosh.
Anyway, we finally get down to, we had this place in Live Oak County. We were going to take it to where, it'd be a born-free moment where we would release it and all. And this took it to this lady, and she got upset. She had agreed to take the deer. And she had I think it was a high-fenced area. But it had broken the antler at the pedicle or whatever, at the base, and she's like, "Oh, that's not going to grow out now." Like, sorry, lady. I just rode 50 miles in the back of a truck to get this here.
Rolling and tumbling.
Yeah. I didn't need to hear that right now. But thanks for taking the deer, anyhow.
With my driver weaving.
Yes. Yeah.
That's pretty funny. You mentioned earlier about bow hunting here in town to try to eliminate some of the deer population and stuff, and you had mentioned something about being careful about if you do hit a deer, it may just get injured and it'll run off, but then what did you say, that it doesn't give you the right, like if it
so even if you're on a large piece of property and you shoot a deer and it hops the fence and you have a good blood trail and everything else, you don't have a right to go trespass on somebody else's property to go retrieve an animal. And that's another thing about being a good neighbor and getting to know your neighbors, is that if you have a good relationship, you can say, "Hey, Joe, I shot this deer, and my daughter or my son or whatever jumped the fence, and it's got a blood trail. We'd like to go retrieve it." And they may say no, or they could say yes, or whatever. But if you have those good relationships established beforehand, chances are better that they're going to say, "Sure, go ahead," or "I'll come out there and help you," or whatever. But but just because you shoot something, you need to make every effort to retrieve, but you don't have the right to trespass to do that.
Well, that's good to know. Me being, like I said, I've gone deer hunting. I think I went twice. The first time I went was not a very popular decision that my friends made to take me, because I like to talk and I like to laugh.
Yeah.
And I was told to shut up, I don't know, maybe about 20 times.
Yeah. Now it's like everybody's on their phone in the blind, or taking pictures and sending them or whatever.
Well, this was probably back in the 80s.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in the deer blind, I'm freezing, I'm shaking, and of course the whole time I'm complaining, like, I'm freezing, I'm cold.
Yeah.
When are we going to leave? I'm hungry.
Yeah. Yeah, nobody wants a whiner in the blind. Yeah.
No. So from that point forward, I don't think those friends ever, they were like, "No, we're not."
That was your last chance.
That was it. You're not going anymore. Let's talk about Possum Cop Chronicles.
Yeah. Okay.
So you write a column for us here at the Pleasanton Express, and and if you haven't read his columns, you need to read them. They are so entertaining. I love reading them each week, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
What got you into it? Was this something that you did in retirement from your game warden position, or did you start before that?
Well, I had always written stories, not necessarily with, I just wrote cool stories down throughout the years. When I was, the Texas Game Warden Association has a quarterly magazine, I believe it is, they put out, and I would write kind of the district or regional rundown and include some stories there. But I'd always wanted to write, and it was kind of interesting because I saw Noelle at Strawberry Pines one night while I was still a game warden, and sat down and talked to her, and I just kind of mentioned, hey, someday when I retire, I may like to write for you or something like that. And then didn't think much about that, and there for a while, I have these friends that invited me to go on this river trip down the Rio Grande. And it's like 90 miles or whatever. It takes 7 days, and you go through the lower canyons. You don't have phone service or anything. And I happened to go on that trip, and we got back, and it's pretty grueling. You go in, the desert is not a cool place to be in June. Is when we usually go, and so you go camp on a rock in the desert for a week, and it's not for the faint of heart. We get back in, we're all driving to Del Rio. And when we finally get service, I get a Facebook message from Noelle, and she's like, hey, why don't you write a column? Of course, before that, I think I had written, y'all used to have a Christmas story contest. And it was right when COVID happened. And so I wrote one 2 years, and I was the winner. So I took my $50 and on each one, and and I was like, man, I got this. I was all nervous, and 700 words. How am I going to do that? I made I think the first one I made exactly 700 words. You got
to abide by the rules.
Like, yeah, and then after that, I completely forgot the rules, and I'm sure I drove Noelle crazy because I think one time I sent her one like 2,000 words or something. And everybody got an email about we ought to make choices and all this stuff. Anyway, so we got back, and she said, you want to write a column, and I said, sure, I'll give it a try, because I think by then I was retired. Yeah. And I just called it As Near As I Can Tell or something. Actually, I didn't call it anything at first. She suggested you need to come up with a name. She helped me a lot, really, and taught me about word choices and all kind of stuff. And so then in another, I don't know what it is about hot weather and wanting to go camping, we you only have so many days to go. So then my wife and I and my son Miles, we decided to go to out to East Texas during July to go camping. And it was like we went tent camping, and I never got why at state parks the shower restrooms are always where the RVs are. It's
Right.
yeah, I mean they're not the ones that need the showers. The ones that are sleeping in the pool of their own sweat in a tent are the ones that need a shower. But you got to go walk through all the RVs to get anyway. But while I was sitting there, had been writing this column, and then I said, you know what, I bet it'd be cool to talk to tell some of my stories. I like telling other game warden stories more, and see if that would catch on, because I started out wanting to kind of write a book about a certain, because I heard so many cool stories when I was a younger game warden, and a lot of those guys are getting older, and some of them aren't here anymore, and all this stuff, and so I kind of wanted to capture that, and so that's what I set out to do. And I kind of started by, I told him, well, I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and you will try to work a story out of that. I said, when were you the most scared? What's the funniest thing that ever happened to you? And what are you most proud of? And we'll come up with something. Well, that worked on a few, but mainly it's guys getting together, gals, and telling stories around a campfire and stuff. And somebody will say something, or you haven't, still going to cafes and meeting with the retirees. And you start telling the stories, and then I thought of another story, and so I'm lucky that I have guys and gals that trust me to tell their stories and not, go off on a tangent or anything like that. So
well, that's really cool. I mean, and in reading it, it reminds me. Do they still do the game warden field notes?
I think Parks and Wildlife, yeah, they do because
still
they,
get Parks and Wildlife, right?
but they're
Just little blurbs.
Yeah, they're little blurbs, and this case was made here or whatever.
And it's always, not that they're funny, but they make it humorous in a way.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
don't do this.
Yeah.
This is a little stupid.
Yeah, you're amazed. I
especially
especially hearing other folks' stories. You're amazed at the dumb things people do.
Yeah. But anyway, you really
Job security.
Yes. Possum Cop Chronicles in the Pleasanton Express. You need to look at that. And you said that you also just you got published somewhere just recently, right?
Well, so the Chronicles part, 4 newspapers carry that. It started with y'all, and then I started. I'm a member of the Texas Outdoor Writers Association, and at one of their conferences, one of the guys from that works for Texas Wildlife Association been reading my columns, and he approached me to write a column for them, and so I write a column for their e-magazine. Texas Wildlife Association is great. We talked a little bit about them earlier about they are advocates for good stewardship of the land, and it's like a $75 membership. But this magazine goes out to their members. They have about 9,000, I believe.
Okay.
And they do public advocacy. They do education programs for both the youth and adults, and just to keep people interested in the heritage of hunting and keep people going. But so they approached me. I write a column for them every month, which is a little longer. And sometimes they're more serious issues that I'll cover, kind of the more scary stuff. It seems like lately, but I don't know. It's just kind of been that way. Those are the stories I can get. But I was also in their print mag this past September.
Well, good.
And so, and the cool thing about that is I didn't realize Boone and Crockett Club, which has been the oldest conservation organization in the United States. They've been around since 1897. Teddy Roosevelt and a guy named George Bird Grinnell started it out. And everybody thinks of Boone and Crockett as big deer in the scoring system.
Yes.
It started out that way because that's kind of was how they kind of judged, as a management tool, is my understanding. And then they're mainly a conservation, it's sort of like TWA on a larger scale.
Okay.
So I get a Facebook message from this guy out of Montana, which is where they're out of, and he's like, hey, we read your article in Texas Wildlife Association magazine. We'd like to post it on our website. And so I don't even know who this dude is. So I start Googling,
Yeah.
And sure enough, he's he does work for Boone and Crockett. And so they picked it up and put it on their website. And
Nice.
so that was pretty cool.
So you get published in 3 other papers, you said?
Get published in 3 other papers, yes. The
Okay.
Comanche Chief, which is Wilkerson.
Really?
Or yeah.
Yeah.
So and what I when I first started this, I was so naive, and Noelle helped me so much. She gave me a list of the newspapers in Texas, and so I just start sending out emails and like, hey, I'm gonna do this, and this is gonna be really cool. And man, nobody.
Right.
And then slowly I do that periodically, and I picked up 4 that have Bandera Bulletin's another one, and
Nice.
the Willacy County News is, of course, where I was stationed down there. So
With
there's
Willacy?
quite a few. Raymondville, Port Mansfield.
Oh, okay.
So that's where a lot of the stories are.
Yeah.
So those are the ones that carry, and then so
Nice.
things kind of picking up, and so that's good.
So when you were out there, did you have to do a lot of watercraft stuff there?
Yes, there and in Corpus. That's why I stayed away. So I'm from here, and when I got out of the Game Warden Academy, I got stationed in Willacy County, and I'd been water skiing and driven boats some, but nothing on the coast a whole lot. Been fishing down there a few times, but you get totally and completely immersed in it then, and we did more water work than anything else. And that's what I liked about the job. Like I was talking about the coast earlier, there's everything to do there. You don't have times where there are lulls really ever, except maybe end of February, March, when it's still cold and fishing hadn't really picked up. But there's always something to do, and
Yeah.
so that's. And I went from there to Victoria, worked that area a while, and it was great, but still wasn't close enough to water. Went back to Nueces County, and did environmental crimes for the state for 10 years as an investigator all over the state, which was not really like real game warden work per se. It wasn't fun, but it was an investigator's job, and and felony environmental crimes mainly. And then demoted to work with my wife, who was also a game warden. And also when Atascosa County came open, it's time to come back home. So, and I really enjoyed that, working
what was some of the most dangerous things that you had to deal with as a game warden? I mean, besides like alligators and the wild.
Plenty of alligators in Victoria, and nobody ever really gave us now they have a class in catching alligators, but when I got here, when I went up there, I hadn't really had much alligator experience, and I got with some folks who did. But you think catching alligators is one thing. Really letting go of them is what you don't really think about, and I didn't really think about till I got there. And I was like, oh, I'll do it by myself. Then you realize the last thing that has to come off is the piece of tape around their mouth when you release it, and so you're by yourself. But I got a good education in that, and if you know how to work it, it's not a big deal. People always say, I don't want to be a game warden because everybody you approach has guns. Well, yes, everybody we approach, or a lot of the folks we approach have guns, but most of them are good contacts, and they have guns, and you're aware, and you know how to deal with that right away. I mean, it's the guns you don't see and you don't know about that you got to worry about, and there's all law enforcement is dangerous, but that's not, that was never my big concern. The scariest thing that I ever did was in Port Mansfield, and it was a boat chase in the Gulf of Mexico, which should not. We were kind of in a bay boat, a good boat, but we're chasing Mexican boats coming up from Mexico, 26-foot pongas with 115 tiller drives that are commercial fishermen coming through there at night with no lights, and you're basically chasing them in the surf, and they will not stop. Because if they stop, they lose their boat, and so they will keep going. It was a wild ride, and holding on was. I was scared at the time, but I guess after I thought about it
probably after the fact.
Yeah. What's going on? Yeah,
there's a lot of adrenaline going on.
Absolutely, but that's probably the wildest thing.
And I can see that. After the fact, you start thinking about it like, wow, that was a little.
Yeah, scary. You're actually boats aren't when you have waves coming up. We weren't using when you're in the chase, you're not using lights. They don't have lights. And so it's dark. You can see their phosphorescent trail where their motor had been. You can smell the bad gas they're burning in their motor. And, I can remember telling Bruce, the guy that was driving, I was just hanging on. And I said, man, there's a boat right in front, because 5 went by us. And it looked like it was a boat, but it was a wave coming over. And so, it was like, it was hard to hold on.
Is it a lot of, now with those situations, is it a lot of like illegal hunting activity, fishing, or was there like drug activity happening?
If they had a bigger motor, they would have been drug runners. So those were fishermen, and it got to be a common thing, and it's still going on to some extent, I'm sure. But back then, this was before GPS was widely used, and so they would, to avoid detection, they would run up from Mexico just outside the surf or between the second and third bar, and then we would wait for them at the end of the Port Mansfield jetties, because we knew they'd have to swing out. We got a report they were coming up there. At the time we heard that, we're like, they're not coming up that far, no way. And we sat out there one night and got in a chase with one, and we completely lost us. And so we went back and we started reinforcing everything, and we had a game plan, and we caught some after that on that next night. But anyhow,
that is pretty scary.
But
you said you worked 10 years with environmental investigations and stuff, which is what you're doing now here in the county. I would venture to say that even might be a little dangerous too.
In this job here, so when I did it for the department, it was kind of on a corporate level, as it were. I mean, it was felony environmental crimes, but we worked with TCEQ, and it was a whole task force deal. We went to Houston and worked with, there was a constable's office that we some Houston ship channel cases, and, assisted on that. We worked with the FBI and EPA on a case out of Corpus on Citgo. And, a lot of times it was like to the point where TCEQ had 12 criminal investigators across the state. TCEQ is huge. We had 6 game wardens that were environmental crimes investigators that were the guns and badges pretty much for TCEQ. And so when they got to a point where they needed a bigger hammer, I guess, to get people to comply or whatever, or something breached over into the criminal realm, then we would work a task force case with them. And that was completely different. We're in unmarked on these task force operations, we'd be in unmarked cars, and with also marked cars on these big search warrants of like some industrial complex in Houston. One of the first things I did was go on one of those, and we had like a part of the search warrant team was a backhoe to look for some line they had going into the discharging where they weren't supposed to be. But those type of warrants, you go in and it's just people going to work, but you have to get their computer records and all that kind of stuff. So it was more like, going in and going, excuse me, ma'am, set down your cup of coffee and back away from the keyboard, please, that type deal.
Yeah.
So those were very, they weren't too, I didn't feel a whole lot of danger on those.
Yeah.
Some of the areas where, you get some of these cash for trash operations or larger operations in some areas, you deal with some people. And here in this job, you deal with some characters. Maybe they just got out of prison and they just don't care, and they don't abide by the standards that the community or the health and safety code allows. So you have to deal with them. But I have plenty of help and cooperation, work with good people, and certainly the sheriff's department. Everything's been helpful in those situations, and so
absolutely,
so that's a good thing.
Absolutely, you see a lot of people that that live in properties that are outside city limits and unincorporated areas, and you see their properties that have a lot of stuff.
Right, pile of tires or whatever,
and then a fire occurs,
and
that's something that you can't. You should keep that to a minimum,
right,
to protect your home.
Right, and really we take more of a community approach here. I mean, it's a kinder, gentler approach. And when I was working for the state, if we got to the point where we were going to investigate something, it was we're going to file felonies, and this is going to be, we're going to make an example out of you. Here, it's like, if you clean this up, if you just clean this up, we try to work with people, because that's the main thing. You want, any type of environmental situation is a local problem. You don't need the state of Texas, my old job, to come in here and unless it's something huge like a spill or discharge of some sort into the public water. You need to keep your property tidy, your community clean, and so it's incumbent upon. And I was really impressed with the county in creating this position and realizing that and doing that, because if you let those kind of things go, well, then you get the situation like the tire fire out on that was out on off Verdi Road, and that's some issues are too big or too much money to clean up even, and so and that's kind of one of them.
The large fire that occurred out on North Atascosa County. Well, it started in Bexar County, I believe.
Oh, earlier this year, yeah.
Yes, that was a huge problem. Talking to some Commissioner Gillespie, we were out there just kind of surveying the area during the fire, and he had mentioned that that's a problem. When you have these properties with so much junk everywhere, where they try to keep it at a minimum, and then when something like this happens, it just exacerbates the situation.
Absolutely.
And then you see people losing their homes, and then they're wondering, why am I losing my home?
Yeah, that's
because you've got stuff to ignite and continue to ignite as it moves on. So, Jon, I really appreciate you coming in. Really enjoy your articles.
Thank you.
I love reading them.
Thank you.
It gives me good joy reading them. And I love your little spin on them, because you have that little humor in there. So it's really fun to read that.
Well, I appreciate that very much.
And I'm glad that you're in other newspapers. I didn't realize that you were being published in other newspapers. That's awesome.
I really enjoy doing that, and it's not anything I'm getting rich off or anything like that, but it's certainly something I feel compelled to do.
Now, I want to talk about deer meat. Not a big deer meat fan.
Yeah.
I do eat it. I like it mixed, like especially when it's a burger. I like it mixed with beef.
Yeah, it's healthier for you.
It is healthy. It is, and I do. And I've had maybe some backstrap that was, like chicken fried backstrap.
Yeah, well, you can fry a piece of cardboard and it's going to taste okay. Yeah. So, I mean.
But that I don't know. I can taste the gaminess in that, and it kind of like, oh, I don't know if I can.
Yeah, it's kind of the same. There are different ways. I'm no expert certainly, but with a lot of game, ducks in particular, and deer meat, especially backstraps. If you're gonna grill them, you want them kind of medium rare in there, in that range, because the more, you know, they don't have much fat or anything, so the more you cook them. Here I'm talking like I'm Jesse Griffiths or something, you know.
Or Ronald Sanchez.
Or Ronald Sanchez. El Jefe de Bombero.
I know we talked about him grilling his Axis meat.
Yeah,
and all this.
yeah, yeah.
And I've had that. So
Axis is a good.
That's good.
Right.
I had this guy that works with my wife, and he grilled some, and it was a steak. It was an Axis steak, and she didn't tell me what it was because she knows how I kind of cringe at, you know, this wild game stuff. And they had a dinner where she works, and she said, I brought a leftover steak if you want it. I'm like, oh, really? Let me go try it. So I cut it up and I ate it. And I'm like, man, this is really good. And, you know, just talking about it. And she's just looking at me with a little smirk. And as I was chewing, I kind of stopped and I said, what is this?
Possum.
Right? And she said, it's Axis. I'm like, oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, there's Neil guys are really good, sought after meat, you know. I'm of the opinion, we used to do these cookouts at Parks and Wildlife headquarters. They'd have this big deal where, I'm drawing a blank of what they called it, but anyway, Expo, Parks and Wildlife Expo. And they'd have game warden cook teams, and we'd go up there and, you know, and everybody'd want to try it. Oh, they got alligator, come try that. All the good stuff was in the back, you know, the shrimp and, you know, but people want like the toothy stuff. Anything you got to soak in milk for a week and then and before you cook it and then throw some stuff on it, I'm not down with. So
yeah, I don't know. I don't know about the alligator. That's one thing I've not tried is alligator.
Alligators, you know, if you fry it, there again, you know, it's all right. But I tried grilling it and stuff. It's like, I'm not too sure about this.
Pretty tough? Seems like it'd be pretty tough. Just depends on how you cook it and how long.
I don't know. Throw enough butter and bacon grease. You know, I mean, that's also the thing about any game warden cook. It's going to have sour cream, a jalapeno, and it's going to be wrapped in about three inches of bacon. You know, and it's like, oh yeah, that's really good.
Because we're covering up all the alligator.
Yeah,
with pork.
Doesn't taste like a shoe anymore. Yeah.
That's pretty funny. Well, John, I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you very much for having us. I think it's great y'all are doing this, you know, and I wish y'all well. And you were talking about expanding on it some, and I think that's a great idea.
This is just the beginning of it, you know, and later we'll expand and be bigger and better, you know. Not that we aren't any, you know, bad right now. We could polish up a few things.
Well, when you're starting out, you know, you learn things and you get better.
Yeah. So. Well, I appreciate you, John. And don't forget to log on to A30 Amplified on YouTube.com. Be sure and like and subscribe to our videos. Also, make sure and you log on to PleasantonExpress.com to keep up with what's going around in our county. You can also read John's columns there on PleasantonExpress.com. Anyway, thank you all for joining us here on A30 Amplified, powered by PleasantonExpress.com and presented by Price Chevrolet. Together, let's drive. And be sure and visit Price Chevrolet out on Highway 97 near Walmart here in Pleasanton. Join us next time. Thank you, guys.